And there we are. And hello, David. And Kent. And Glenn. Boom, 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 boom. There we are, 4 o'clock on the dot. I'm in. Dennis is in. So here we go. You ever guys ever go on like YouTube and you're hitting the hey Larry. You'll be going through some of the videos and then it goes to these lives people do. And man, I wish I could screen capture some of that stuff and run some of that stuff. There's puppet shows. There's people that just like do their toenails. Just really weird stuff of people. There's some girl that just breathes in the microphone, and it's just kind of weird. She like licks the microphone and stuff. But and I look, and some of these people have like 4 people watching, and I'm thinking, man, why would you do this? I mean, are you that lonely? And then I realize that's why I do it, because I get lonely on Friday afternoons. But no, sometime you should check the YouTube live stuff out. Things that are not very entertaining, but there's a kid that plays guitar. He just stands in front of a microphone. It says USB device not recognized. I don't even know what it is. Hey, Tony. And Gerard's there. But yeah, it's really weird, but it's also like kind of gives you kind of a look out there at people like myself that have done this stuff. And yeah, it's just I'm just trying to figure out of like why do they even do it? Because some of them it lost sound. Did it really lose sound? Huh. It says does not recognize audio device. Let me look at this. Audio capture. Let's look at this. It's not recognizing it. Oh, you heard me fine. It just changed. Oh, because I cut out the other audio. So is it working now, or is it not working the same? Okay, thank you there, Claudia. But I don't know if it came back or not. But everybody can hear. I have this microphone, and I don't know if the camera mic's picking it up. Just someone say yes, the audio's working, or everyone at one time say it loud and clear. Okay, so I'll just stay with it. I tried to add it back in, so I don't know which mic I'm on, but I will not mess with it anymore. But yeah, I always find that odd is just how many people do that stuff and how they don't. There was there's a lot of film groups that they claim to do films. They're film companies, and they have projects, and I watch a lot of that type of stuff, and a lot of it I watch because just to see what we get right and what people get wrong. And I can't believe any of these people ever took a film class in their life, because just everything they do that's wrong. Um, so but and it's not to be critical, and I don't want to sit here and just run videos and make fun of people, but it's the puppet show one I liked. It's people singing these really goofy songs, a man and woman in costumes with puppets. That was actually Trevor couldn't believe how long I watched it, because I was like, I think puppets are cool. I'm a fan of the goofiness of puppets for the moment, but I liked the Muppets and that type of stuff. And Mr. Rogers had puppets, and so puppets, and Sesame Street had puppets. So I told him puppets are always entertaining. But there you go. It's 109. 109. I don't know if we crested the 109. We were hanging now. We're at 109 now, so it's 109 degrees out because it's a touch warm. Um, the news gets really excited out here in Arizona. You know, you got all these 20 somethings and 30 somethings that start talking about it rained point zero 0.01 inches, and then they start talking about like they're all excited. Thursday it could be 114, and it's kind of sad because I got to work in it, and it gets very, very warm, and it's hot, and it's just not fun. Today I was lucky; I finished early, and then I got some work done on the yard, and had to cut some limbs off a tree before monsoon comes in, and I got some of that done and some stuff in the pool, and took a shower. So if you notice, I actually don't look so raggedy. So it was kind of nice. I was able to prepare for this and step out of it into the AC and relax. Sometimes I'm just in here and I'm still haven't cooled off. I actually will cool off during the show. We have cooled down into the 70s. I'm not going to see a 70-degree day for another couple months. The lowest it's going to get here is sometime where in the mid 80s at night, and that's the big thing that's happened the last few days is the nights are staying warm. Finally, we're at that point in the summer where it just stays hot all night. So last couple of nights, I think it's been around 100 degrees about 10 o'clock at night. So it's all that heat coming off the concrete and asphalt, and people put rocks. There's not a lot of grass yards. There's golf courses, but there's not a lot of grass yards anymore. And because of that, it's just heated up. It's they talk about global warming. We've created reflective heat in our own communities. I, on the other hand, have a lot of grass because grass and water just evaporates. It either goes to the ground table or evaporates. You can't waste water. So therefore, I have lots of grass and bushes, and I have some trees. And that's because they also clean the air and provide oxygen. And also, my house is a little cooler. It's not much, but you can feel it. And so it does keep things a little cooler. It's much nicer for the doggies. And I like that. I like the smell of fresh cut grass too. So I relished that today. Today I just mowed the back. Let's see. On one of the first This Day episodes, it's about a claim Jacob sold. How many did he have? The three we know of are the oh man, see, this is that thing, man. Why do I get it? Why do I hit that wall? It's the Big Rebel, the General Grant, and it's the guy's name who had the claim next to him. um, oh man, what was that? I'm trying to think of the guy's name that had the claim next to him, and they were all named after. He owned a portion of those claims. And Thomas Glover did a really nice talk at the Rendezvous one year about that. A lot of people told me they thought it was a little boring. I found it fascinating and interesting, all he learned about that. It was, what was that guy's name? The Gross Load, Henry Gross. So it was Gross Load in Prescott, and then down south from there, there was the Big Rebel and the General Grant. And yeah, we did the one of the Big Rebel was actually years later. Someone else had it and was doing quite well. So he was a good prospector, obviously, and the Gross Load was a producing claim. One of the problems is there is a difference between a prospector and a miner. Um, People generally have had mines, had money to put money into it to develop it, and had the capital to produce, and so they could make more money. Remember, we all hear the term, to make money, you need money. So if you have money, you can make money, and that's how that works. Waltz, I think on the Gross claim, they say he was kind of swindled out, and maybe on the others, but I'm sure that was kind of the deal most of the time, and it was probably the reason he didn't file on anything in the superstitions and other things, because I think he learned his lesson. He was a citizen, but Thomas Glover talked about there's two books. The recorder's office in the county would have these two different books, And what these people would do is they would see that it was only in the one book, so they would try to predate it in the other book. They'd pass someone a $10 or $5, and they would get it predated. And what happened is that people lost their claims over this stuff because the people with some money would go in and then say, "Hey, there's some gold there. We can do something with this, and then we can exploit it further." Where Waltz wouldn't have had as much success probably with what he had. Okay, he said the gross load, okay, and it was gross, GROSSE, and yeah, there was like 5 allotments of the gross load. Those mines were in the Bradshaws, weren't they? The Big Rebel and the General Grant were south, more in the Bradshaws, yes. So, but they were all known mines and all producing mines. So, and there was probably some others. Um, there's one I know was maybe on the Colorado or just outside of Los Angeles. I ran across one day. They said he was working on an allotment there, and it named the mine. And I'm trying to remember what book that was. I read that out of because I wanted to start checking it against things. Unfortunately, Thomas Glover is not in the mind to be able to share his research. I'm going to have to check and see when Greg receives Thomas's research on those claims and various patented claims and see if I can find something about that one, but I got to remember where I read it at. Anyways, talking about reading, Jason Fritz's book, Cracking the Code on the Lost Dutchman Mine. Not to be confused with Jim Wilson's Cracking the Golden Egg, which has a blue cover. It's up on the bookshelf somewhere. I should have grabbed that. But don't want confusion, and I don't think Cracking the Golden Egg's out there except in used bookstore. But Jason's book, $39.95 for the hardback. Always do that so people know it's hard. And then there's a softback, and I think that's $29.95. Color photos, all that kind of stuff. Oop, I opened it up and I went to the black and white photos, but it's got color. Got nice color photos and stuff. Jason's very appreciative. Sent me some very nice text, and he does join us in this. I'm not paying attention to that right now. Then the other book, which we'll probably get a review up or have to talk about sometime, 10 Reasons Why It's Not in the Superstitions, and I'll tell you where it is. And it's only about 16 bucks. It's only 70, 80 pages. It has some color photographs as well. And it's by Glenn Rogers, who showed up here and showed up in a number of places on Facebook. And Glenn was very pushy about his book. I decided to purchase a copy. It appears Glenn has disappeared, no longer promoting his book like he was before. But I really wanted to kind of give it a chance, even though I didn't really. I thought he was going to be a Cave Creek guy or a Wickenburg guy or one of these other guys, the guys that says, "Oh, it was in the Bradshaws and the different things," and he wasn't. But yeah, not very good research, poor research, and not a great job on it. So, but still all the same, being someone who collects books, I collect books. I also spoke to an individual who was involved with this group. If you can see it, the Killer Mountains. Here, this is a paperback. I didn't know there was the later paperbacks had an additional piece to it, and I didn't know I even owned one. And we talked about it. He's talked about that epilogue chapter that had been added to the 73 edition. I had no clue, and I'm pretty sure I picked this one up at Sky Harbor Airport flying out one day. I had the Killer Mountains. I'd read the books and had my hard copy at home, but I saw this and I'd read it a lot, so I thought, well, that's good. And I got this the same time. I also picked up a copy because I have several copies of this, and it's handy here, so I'll grab one without knocking everything off the bookshelf, hopefully. Why does it work that way? That you create problems. All right. Anyways, Robert Joseph Allen's book, which has really good stuff in it, and it's about 80%, 85% just terrible. But the book that confused a lot of people. But it sold well too. But these books were both, you would find them And those little, I don't know, back in the day they had that little thing you'd spin around and have paperbacks in it. And this was in one of those too. I think I picked up both of these at the same time, and that's when I read this. But yeah, but I had a good conversation with one of Glenn McGill's crew members from a later digs. So that was very interesting this week. And I also talked to Shoes, and I talked to Greg Davis, and I think that might have been it. Oh, I talked to Ron Feldman. So had really good conversations with everyone. Always fun to talk to everybody, see how everybody's doing. Let's see. So none of those claims match the candle box gold, correct? Um, yeah, well, and that was a strange thing too because um, we don't know what happened to the some of the other stuff because I can't remember what book it's in. Waltz had collected a number of different samples from different places, and I know Reinhard Petrash. I don't know if he ended up or Julia ended up with some of that stuff where it wasn't high gold content, but it was some more in different places he'd been, and that stuff disappeared. I thought one of the Petrash brothers ended up with it. I could be wrong. So I've always wondered why would Joe Deering have to work this way? Well, that's been the big question is it kind of falls on deaf ears that why would he spend a year at Silver King when he had this mine and all this gold at the forum. When I first joined the first forum back in 2000, 2001, or whenever it was, and I got into that was one of the topics was everybody was going on about the Deering thing, and we were all trying to question the reason why he was having nothing to do with it. Didn't make any sense to anyone, and it kind of. Plus, at that time, I was one of those people that wondered if the Soldier's Mine, the Deering Mine, and Waltz's Mine were three separate or two different mines. I did not think they necessarily had to be the same mine. And since no one has a specific area for any one of them, because nobody gave it to them, it's unusual. Tom Collenborn's Chronicles said that James Kidd was buried by a friend at his mine in the eastern, but he couldn't document. I'd have to look that up. I'm sure it's in the book. The book is buried right now, so I'm sure it's in the book what happened to his body and his remains and stuff. And I probably could look it up online. I don't want to mess with anything. Let me. Oh, let's. I don't know where I'd find the link right now. But there is a link to find this. Yeah, he's going to be in there. Yeah, I'm sure in the book it mentioned it where he's buried. I don't know if he was buried on his claims or not. I don't know. So I don't remember us talking about that either. So anyhow, so that there being done, man, can we pull a 110 while we're all talking? No, it's just going to stick at 109 and then start to drift down, back down from there. So, anyways, that was those two books and these other two, which are actually for books that you could actually find on those little carousels readily, and they were all over the place. And you can still find this one in any bookstore that has Arizona stuff or whatever used books. You'll find this one a lot. You won't find this one as much, the old paperback of the Killer Mountains, but you will find it occasionally. So they're out there. God, how much were these back in the day? Can I even see in this dim light? It's not written on here. They used to write it. It used to be on the back of the book. Here, this one looks like $1.95. Here, let me look. Yeah, the Killer Mountains was $1.95. This was Pocket Books, and it doesn't have a price on the cover or the back. Okay. It couldn't have been much more. So back in the days when you didn't have to lose everything, you didn't have to refinance your home to buy a book. Wayne, I don't understand how stuff works with mines and claims. Okay, your opinion, what will happen to the Wasp Mine? Well, the owner will do whatever he wants with it. The Wasp Mine is owned by Bob Shoes, so Clay sold that few years back. So it's the claim, everything about it, and the property. He physically owned the property. So Bob Shoes owns the Wasp now. We actually did a long form video of a tour of it. Bob, myself, and Trevor walked through the entire place, and Bob did everything. We took samples. We spent a good part of a day there, and yeah, we had a really good time. It was full of pack rat poop, but it was a funny moment as Bob reached in to what he thought was dirt. He took it out. He was sitting there talking. I said, "You know, that's all pack rat dirt." He looked down and realized it was. He was like, "Oh man, I need to wash my hands." But yeah, Shoes owns that, so it could become a parking lot. There is a problem with it. It is on pit mine. It's not an adit mine anymore, or anything like what you're thinking. It's basically a pit. It has a hanging wall on the, is it kind of the northwest side? I'm trying to think, west side. And there's a hanging wall. It's unstable. That hit a spring, so there's seepage. At one point, they had a leased bulldozer that sunk in it. And then Bob had to go out and help pull it out. I think he brought the tractor down, and they had to pull it out. So it just, that fills up with water from underground. But yeah, we were talking. Yeah, if we ever release that video, it explains a lot of it. But it's basically just an open pit now. The original mine tunnels, all that stuff's gone from it, and it's waterlogged. And I don't know if there's any. I know I heard a story once. I don't know if it was Clay. Um, Clay verified it for me, so maybe, but I don't think he originally told me the story. And someone said Clay had started digging a certain direction, and then someone had to point. He wasn't even on his claim anymore when he found a little bit of gold. He found a little bit of gold, and he was working with it. And the worry was he'd create some instability in that area, and it wasn't. It was probably going under Goldfield and whatever was going on there. But yes, you go down. Well, I'll talk to Trevor and see if we can put something together on that. But that's what happens to that. So it is part of Goldfield Ghost Town, which it should be. And there's nothing to preserve there. There's the equipment, which I guess they could leave, clean it up, wash it off. But there's I mean, that was something we briefly talked about. It would take a lot to get it operational again because it's been unoperational. The settling ponds would have to be all replaced. All the equipment, you'd have to go through the electrical panels. Who much knows how much of the wiring's been chewed up by the pack rats. I don't think any of the old generators out there and that stuff is working. So it would be a complete overhaul. And because the gold wasn't really just jumping out of there, even with the price it is, I don't think it would be worth it to make it operational. Um, Not in any sense. So there you go. A drink and special cigarette. Well, I can't do a special cigarette. There's no smoking in the studio. To all those gone before, recent treasures lost, raise your glass and flick your bick. Okay. Sounds like a bar toast. Anyways, I still will. To Bob Ward and a bunch of other people. Clay. But if you die and don't file on your claim by the end of the year and renew it, do your assessment work, you lose it. Depending where you're working, whether it's a placer, it's a load mine, and so forth. They work like that. The Dons did such a thing with man, it's right there until I get ready to say it. But the Linesba cabin and the Linesba house. Um, the Linesba had several claims all through Peralta Canyon, and the Dons were interested because of some issues butting heads with Mrs. Linesba about being able to hold Trek there every year, which Trek was being held north of the camp, northwest of her house up in that area. So they found out that she had not filed on claims in that area, so they filed claims in that area. so that they could hold Trek. So they would have the mining claim record, and then they would be able to hold Trek. And they did that, and then it turned around. The Forestry Service told them, because they tried to make a deal with her on the property they're currently on too, but her well was on that partially. And I think part of the problem was she was worried about her well, and they were saying, well, we can work something out. And it was like a year or two of them trying to work things out with her, and she was becoming worse and worse, more belligerent. So the Dons were like, and there's a whole bunch of letters with the Forestry Service and them going like, we don't know what to do. We have no idea like how to deal with her at this point. And see, one of the problems was with Trek was every year they'd put up posts and put up like shell over little roofs, and they would build some stuff up. Well, each year, as soon as Trek was over, Mrs. Linesway would send people that worked at her place and have them tear everything down. So if the Dons didn't remove it, she tore it down. And the Dons had gotten permission from the Forestry Service that they could leave stuff up, and they were like, hey. So the Forestry Service actually was working with the Dons to help them out, because Dons were trying doing something nice, and yeah, there was no reason for her to tear down, but she'd like to have that control, is what it appears to be. And then it got really crazy because during that time period, this is the early 40s, Barry Storm is trying to claim, and he was known, John Clemenson was known by the Forestry Service and the Dons, but he was trying to like involve some stuff with the Dons, him and another individual, and he kept dropping their name with the Forestry Service because knowing they had favor with the Forestry Service of stuff he was doing, and then talking about something with them in claims. And then the Dons, there's letters where they're saying, no, we don't have anything to do with him. He can be a guest and so forth. It was kind of like, it's very strange going through those letters and seeing all these people's names and stuff. And like I said, one of the coolest pictures, and I don't have it. I meant to print one and show it, but it's Brownie Holmes and Bill Barkley sitting there on horses because they're getting ready to run the water up to Fremont Saddle in Geronimo's Cave area for the Dons, because they would run all the water up for Trek. So there'd be casks of water up there for people to drink when they got that point of the hike. So I have some of the bags too. We'll have to do a one on Trek and some of the stuff I have from Trek. I have the little bags. I used to wear these shoulder bags. They're like little pouches. But yeah, and it says Dons on it and has the sombrero. And they used to keep their little sack of lunch and some stuff in that. I have some of those. Um, Someone passed away from the Dons. I'm trying to remember their names, and I don't quite remember the names, but they had a whole box of a bunch of stuff, and a bunch of that stuff was in there, along with a bunch of other things, and I was able to make sure the Dons got a bunch of that. I kept a few, and then gave the Dons the rest of them, so other Dons members could have them too, because they're kind of a neat throwback thing. But yeah, they're like little, put it over your shoulder, and you'll see, if you ever see pictures of the old Treks and stuff, and people have these little white bags with sombreros, that's what they are. Anyhow, so we ended up there. But that's one of those cool things about going through stuff and then finding stuff and go, man, that was pretty cool. And then finding and then realize you have that stuff and all that. I actually have a little display box. I have to bring it in here sometime. Like I said, going through the Trek stuff, and it has all the buttons because they started doing the buttons. I can't remember what year, but they started doing these little buttons. And I have the box, little shadow box that has all the buttons in it. And then I have a collection of other buttons duplicated from certain years that I went, and then other people who had went and stuff and would just give me the buttons. So I have all that. So very cool. But yeah, there's a bunch of Trek stuff still around. Dons don't reconvene till probably September. Ron Feldman worked for Crazy Jake. Yes, he worked for Crazy Jake. Brian Lichtman worked for, a lot of people worked for Crazy Jake. Shoes did. Shoes just packed for him. Shoes never worked up at Peter's Mesa and Squaw. Um, Shoes made an arrangement to pack in supplies. This is, I don't know, 60s, early 70s, But Shoes made an arrangement to pack in supplies. He'd bring in, take the horses and burros, and he would bring in the supplies and drop everything off and then leave, and then be told what he needed to bring back in. And then him and Jake got into an argument, and it was probably about money or something. Jake was trying to take advantage of him, and that was the end of Shoes. Um, Ron worked for him, ran into him in a parking lot, I think, in Apache Junction. And I think it was Ron and his brother. And that's Ron. I don't know if him and Brian Lickman both worked for Jake at the same time. They might have. I know Brian Lickman worked for everybody because he worked for Chuck Ayler, he worked for Al Morrill, he worked for Crazy Jake. But they were all young kids. I mean, I think when Ron went up to work for Crazy Jake, he probably was still in his teens. So, uh, those sound like one of the first camelbacks. Yeah, well, I don't know if they're camelbacks, but yeah, they're just little bags. I'm not going to go get one, but yeah, next week I'll try to remember to bring in some stuff, or we'll do a video. I have to look at what I got. Maybe a slideshow on Trek. But yes, there's a lot of people come up to the rendezvous, and usually they don't want to be kind of like they'll come over to me and talk, and they'll be like, "Hey, is so and so going to be here? I worked for Jake for this year and this time." Because I think people look back at it now and realize there was a lot of crap set with that. Once you grow up, you realize he was not treating people well, and he was kind of full of shit. So they have a different reflection of it. Ron says, I learned from Jake, how some people accomplish things and do things. Well, there's a lot of maybe some good things, but he said I also learned how not to treat people and a lot of bad things and the wrong thing to do. And but I mean, I guess it's that thing is if you learn when he came out, the person he learned from in the mountains would have been Jake. So I think Brian had it better from Al Morrill and those guys and Chuck Ayler. But I think Ron knew Chuck Ayler too. He holds him in high regard, which a lot of people did. So all those guys during that period, late '60s, early '70s, and that operation, and he was bringing anyone. And think about it, who better to get a bunch of teenage boys going out, people in their early 20s. So I'm going to find the Lost Dutchman, recruit those groups that really don't have a pot to piss in, aren't married, don't really have anything to tie them down, and he would rope them in and then literally abandon them back in the mountains and then keep them half starved, kind of stuck back there. And well, Jake lived very high on the hog. Where do you think Crazy Jake got his information? Well, some of it he made up. A lot of it he made up. I think he got information from different people, talking to people, and he created information. A lot of Jake's stuff was nonsense. Um, there's a there it, there's a lot of people still that will take historical documented stuff and then just embellish and work with it and say it's just like Ladislaw Guerrero. I mean, was a guy who was a very nice, Shu says the guy couldn't speak English. He was just this. He was a cook, and he was a nice guy and everything. And he was scared to death when he was left out there all by himself. And he said, but Jake told everybody else because Ladislaw couldn't correct it. None of them spoke Spanish. That Ladislaw had formerly been a Jesuit priest and knew all these secrets and stuff. And that's what caused the shooting. And Ladislaw was scared to death. Like I think we did the video on it where Shu said you could see where the gun, as Ladislaw pulled the trigger, it went up through the air and shot through the roof, the canopy over the cooking area. And Shu said Ladislaw drug the body out of there and was hiding because he was scared to death of what happened. And they ended up deporting him. He ended up coming back, but once he got his papers in order. But yeah, it was kind of like that was Jake's thing, and there's a lot of stories about Jake just pulling the wool over people's eyes. So there you go. I saw they pumped out the water from log and found more water. Well, they pumped the water out, and let's just take a moment and realize they pumped the water, put it in the retention pond that was over the supposed underground river. So that was my first question: is why didn't you run it downhill someplace out of the way and create something there, a reservoir? Why did you put it right next to it? Obviously, because it was easier and you could have it on camera. But yeah, they put it right there next to it, and it just happened to be right above. And they brought a bunch of plastic, and they talked about laying it out, but when they were pumping the water, you never saw the liner. So it just, I was like, well, man. And then they were like, well, it didn't really refill fast at first, and that it really, well, yeah, but if it's saturating the ground, eventually it just saturates the ground and it's going back in the aquifer, um, which I talked about earlier. That's what water does. It evaporates or it goes back in the aquifer. So it was kind of bizarre. It's meant for entertainment and television, so I guess we're not supposed to think about it too much. But I know he's had to work for his dad in shoes, and I know they worked at Rogers Trough, and they also had to pump water out of the Mammoth and probably the Black Queen as well. And yes, there's, I know San Felice has had to pump the Silver King, and yeah, all this stuff they pump. So it's the way it is, but yeah, that was a strange kind of like Josh going about like I know what I'm talking about and all that, and then they kind of made him look foolish, and then they just had him quit talking about it because he was like, I don't get it, it's filling back up, and I was just like, I'm not gonna make fun of him for it. He's getting a paycheck, but yes, it was like sounded like the right idea, and then it's like we all want to know, Josh, why did you let them put the pond right on top of the aquifer that you were trying to drain out? That didn't make a lot of sense. Which one is gonna stick their finger in the dam? Yeah. And let's hope Dwayne Ollinger's fine. I noticed a number of things with that episode as Dwayne supposedly has something wrong with him, and they get him out. They're worried it's a heart attack, and then they take him to the hospital. But then when he's in the hospital, I don't know if anyone noticed, he had a haircut, and then he didn't have a haircut, and then he had a haircut, and then he didn't have a haircut. So they have a problem with continuity, obviously. This was all filmed over a year or so ago. So they did 2 seasons in one. So I don't know what's happening with him. I'm sure he's fine for whatever it is. He's getting older, but yeah, that was a weird moment of continuity. How he was like hair's cut, not just the haircut he got last season, but his hair got cut very short, and then it grew back again, and then it was short again, and I was like, okay, they shot that way out of sequence. So I don't know what's going on with him. Um, but now Chad's in charge, so he should be fine. Josh swears up and down that they're really nice guys, and he likes being around them, and they're cool. So we will give them that. I don't know. Hijinks at Blind Frog, and every time they see a frog, they get all excited. It's like, okay, so there we go. Glad it's someone and not me. I'd rather do what I do and go make the living I make because I'm feeling someone's running a vehicle. I can hear it out there. The hum. Hmm. They had a bunch of cable trucks out there earlier for fiber optic cable for this very type thing. Not mine, but a different company. And I'm wondering if they had to bring the trucks back in and they got a fiber optic failure. So, do not know. But they are not the company that I deal with, so I'm not alarmed. Unless, because they ran their own lines in their own spots. At least we have really every day from on this day. Okay. Anyway, so that was cool. Of course, we don't have too many shows like that either to watch, so it's kind of fun to kind of jump into it and do it. I do hate, and they've begun the Oak Island thing now where they do the last minute of the before commercial, they rerun it. So as you might bump into the new content spot, you got to go through a minute of the content you just watched before commercial. And if you're like me, it's either recorded or you let it delay and then you watch it so you can skip through commercials. And if you're doing that, you're finding you're watching the same thing way too often. So there's what, 5, 6 times you're watching the thing you just watched when you skip through. Um, we're two sets of German product, Waltz and Weiser and Jacob and Ludi. I don't know about that so much. That was the Berry Storm, and several people had the Jacob and Ludi. There was a lot of German prospectors, so I'm sure there was a couple, and then they kind of, I think it all got mixed together, and I think that was a huge problem. I think at first you had the Julia Thomas story. People knew something had happened. Waltz had died. She went searching for the mine, which raised everybody's ears. Hey, wonder what that's about. And it took a while to take hold. Dick Holmes started telling stories after a few years, and I think it got a little more notoriety. I think it was a local story, obviously, and then it started spreading out because they'd found gold at the Mammoth, and they found the Black Queen, and there were some other spots. And they knew there had been other mines that had been producing, and I think because of that, that's where it starts to build on. And you don't see, I mean, the one thing you do not see is you find the early, when Waltz first died, that first couple of years, there's stories, and they will reference Julia, but there's no real big interview stories with Julia or anybody or Reinhard Petrasch. None of that stuff happened. And then later, all these different stories, and then of course 30, 40 years later, now you have Barry Storm and other people using these stories. Charles Clark had written stories for the entertainment for the public, and I think that all gets mixed in. There was the folkloric issues, possibly a couple of German prospectors, and then it got attached, and then it got mixed with the other two. I know one was Miller. Was it Jacob and Ludi Miller or Jacob Miller? I don't know. There was something like that. And I think the stories all start to crisscross. And then what helped all of us is as time went by, more and more documentation. And people started separating things and finding, okay, there is this, but there is not that. Do you think that Dick Holmes tried following Jordan? That would have been probably a mistake because when they first went in, they went with a couple different prospectors on the western side, and then they started going in with Herman and Gottfried, and they wouldn't have probably. He wouldn't. I don't. I don't think he ever tried to follow him. I think he got to know a few people, and he got to know enough information. And I think there's, with names involved in his story, there's something in there that's a kernel of truth of what happened. But, I mean, Gilgold bugging out. I don't even remember you coming in. Well, have a wonderful day in San Antonio, Texas. Golden days. Yeah, I didn't even see you coming in. I'm looking back to see where I missed it. But, yeah, that one of the problems with that is you can't go back, and the newspapers ran everything. So there's the Julia, and they talk about Julia, and they usually reference her as like there was a woman that took care of the old man, and da da da. And then it kind of gets further from that, and then Dick Holmes started like assuming the story, and you can see as that happens, he becomes like the expert. And of course, what helped was Reinhardt had left town. Herman was out more towards Superior and he was not living in town. And Julia was busy with her religious stuff, even though she still met with people. There was a number of people she met with and talked to who were looking for the Dutchman mine because she believed if she shared information, people would do right by her giving them the information she could on things. So it's I think, but then Dick Holmes had all the stories. So was Jacob? No, every document we find is Jacob Waltz, Waltz. I think, and this is another thing I think, but he was Jacob Waltz. We know it from the papers in Mississippi, we know it from from Los Angeles. We know that from the papers in Prescott. He spelled his name the sign, and we same. And then we see the signatures, and even in Phoenix, the signatures appear to be the same individual. I think what happens is as people start talking and you're a storyteller, you're embellishing or doing things to separate and create things. So it didn't help. Dick Holmes had his own versions and would say things. We had one person who creatively created um, not a journal, but information that he gave people, and then that influenced other things. So the Jakob thing, and certain things out of books. It's what they tried to do is find their own way to make it like personable or something different to get some mileage out of their version of the story. Milton Rose did it. Nothing to that. We know where Jacob Waltz was born now. See, one thing that no one ever understood was, and we should always look to it, like nickname. Well, why would he have a nickname? Like a nickname. I don't know. He would have been just Jake Waltz. I don't think, I don't know. The Snowbeard thing came later. People started calling him Snowbeard in the newspapers. But I think what happens is people are telling stories and the folklore takes hold far more than the actual story. But what people didn't understand is we did not envision the internet in the 1910s, 20s, 30s, even though Tesla probably has a paper somewhere written about it. But we didn't envision what was going to happen. And people took records, destroyed things because it's stupid things. There was probably a Jacob Waltz death certificate. Someone probably nicked it. There was probably his, other papers that people nicked or destroyed because they didn't want anybody else to get it because it didn't really mean anything except a historic value, but people were weird like that. And what happens as time went by is we find, oh, there's more records, and there's a lot more information out there. And even what we thought we knew in the 70s or 80s and into the 90s, by 2000, then there was an explosion of how we could access information. And just looking at things like ancestry is something so unheard of. It makes everybody a researcher. You just got to have it. Go into ancestry, get an account, and then type names in and start searching, and you'll find things. Just the recorder's office, assessor's office, just so many records ended up online. And I don't think anyone ever expected all that. And it really makes a lot of people look bad because they literally created information and said there was, oh no, this is real. Oh no, I have these, oh, this is a real thing. No, you can, and they became experts. And then what happened was within 3 or 4 or 5 years, everything starts crumbling away because more and more information comes out. You can't say I was born here in Arizona when your actual um, census records of you and your family are going to come out and show. So people tended to do that. Henry Burns was a great example. If someone wants a great example of someone being not who they are and creating a total persona over time and making it so hard and confusing, Henry Burns was a great one. It wasn't even his name. And you look through it and he'd been out of prison. He was a confidence man and everything that went on. And he might have been okay later in life or something like this, but he had children, but people doubted he had the treasure stories because he didn't have any children. Turns out he had several children and a lot of things, and they were some of those people, his children's children, the people that filled out all the information on him. You just think it's not going to happen, and it does. It doesn't mean you have relatives that do it. It's just there is a record trail, and now people try to stay off the grid more and try to watch it, but it's almost impossible. There's somewhere, somehow, something. Some of the people I know that stay off the grid the most Sorry about that. And think there's almost no fingerprint out there of them, no imprint. There's a lot of confusing information because they've tried to create a different persona. And the real information that is there, once you realize it's them, it's like very confusing. Um, Skip tracing people are really good at what they do, and if they want to find people, and it's just we had someone working for me that was they didn't try to do anything malicious, but things get misfiled too. And what happened was this person had been working for me, and they'd been there a couple of years, and everything was fine. And but we would do different background checks. And one of the areas we had to move to, we moved to a building that needed a higher security access, very high security. So they had to run a much deeper security background run because of possible information was located in the meeting. Now, nobody in the room could have accessed that information because they had no idea how to do it and they didn't have access to that room, but there was always a possibility. So, because of that, they had to run this, and then they found out they had a ticket, and I think it was like Maryland when they were a teenager, and it was unresolved because they moved from there, and they had no idea there was not really a warrant, but there was an outstanding. It was like crazy. It's like, okay, so there's this ticket from 14 years ago, and all this. It was crazy, and we're like, can she not work here? You know. It would have been great to interview the first members of the Arizona Pioneer Home. Well, the Pioneer Home, got to remember, most of the people that ended up in the Pioneers' homes, Godfrey Petrash's case, it's because they had no place to go. I think it was one of the reasons Reinhardt committed suicide because of what happened to his dad. You got to remember, we joke at bad rest homes, and there's movies about bad rest homes and retirement places, and they weren't like, even 20, 30 years ago, they weren't like what they are today. There was a lot of problems. Think of what it was like 100 years ago. It was a government funded place where you just basically put people that had no place to go and you didn't know what to do with them. And you just didn't want them sleeping on the sidewalk. And it was just like, we need some place for them to go to die. And think about Godfrey ended up in the Pioneer Home, and then next thing you know, he was in the mental asylum, and then he was dead. And I think that happened a lot more than you think. I don't think the Pioneers Home was the comfortable place for a long time. Reinhardt, you got to remember, a lot of these guys never made it. Herman was out at his place in Superior and died. Reinhardt committed suicide. Godfrey ended up in the mental institution. Julia died of Bright's disease. She was living at home. Albert Schaefer died, and he was very involved with them after Walter died. But Albert Schaefer died out of his claims while he was on his claims in this shack. Dick Holmes, I'm sure, died at home probably. Gus Barkley, I believe, died at home. A lot of people in this, they weren't in the pioneers' homes. Most of them were. That was usually the people. The reason a Ned Piper would stay out in the mountains, even though he knew things were really bad, would be he did not want to go to that place at that time, which ends in those 60s, late 50s, early 60s. So it was, hey, Jax, nice to see you. Just open that door. But I think these guys did not want to be put, so you wouldn't have found those guys in there as much. One of the few I met was a guy named Bruce, and Bruce was a very nice gentleman who'd grown up. He wasn't a Dutchman guy, but he'd come out here from Texas in a wagon. And I'm thinking, man, he was, when I met him, which was probably in the 80s, he'd come over Thanksgiving dinner. My mom would cut his hair and cook him Thanksgiving dinner, and he'd have dinner with us. He was blind, and he would have dinner with us. She'd bring him in from the home because he, I don't know, had no family or whatever. He had family, I think it was. They just didn't have anything to do with him. So she'd have him and sometimes someone else, but he came for several Thanksgivings, and he would talk about that stuff. And I wish I would have spent more time listening and talking to him, but it was just basically he rode freight, ran freight between Tucson and Phoenix when he was a young man. Interesting stuff, but I was still just a kid too. Is there any type of Margaret Herman's cabin site? Well, yeah, the stoop is there. you can see that it's still something was there. There's trash laying around, some trash still. Um, I took a piece of sheet metal from the roof. It was on the ground, and I recognized what it was. But there's still some trash. You can drive up there and go to it. There's nothing. People dug around there, but yeah, you can go there. I think we didn't we video that. There's so many things we did and we videoed, but we didn't use it. And I know Frank did one with Tom Collingboard and someone else. But we didn't do it because we just thought there really wasn't really anything to it. You could talk about Herman a little, but yeah, there's not much anything left here now. It's been torn down for so long. But yeah, you can see kind of where the shack was. It was more of a shack than a cabin, and you can kind of see where it was at, and that's about it. And then there's some remnants of rusty metal laying around still, but that's about it. So there's not much left of that. But again, going back to that pioneers thing, yeah, I just don't think most people, the people that ended up in there, were people we wouldn't have known of. And then I ended up talking to a lot of people like it because that's what I thought is I would find some of these old timers, or some of these old timers would sometimes have a parent or someone that knew something and or knew someone, and I would find stories. And I found it was more of the people just normal, living in their own house later, um, doing all right. I found that's more the case than anything else. So most of those guys, after going through a lot of that stuff, ended up doing all right. The guy I met from Globe, that his dad had known, he had met and knew who Reinhard Petrash was, but his dad had known him or worked with him or something. And he didn't have much to say. I mean, I think everyone was really excited. And then I said, yeah, but he didn't have much to say. One, he was pretty young, like Tom, well, not as young as probably Tom was. Well, no, maybe he might have been the same age. But he said it interested him a little, but it was his dad's friend. And it's kind of like a lot of us when you were 10, 11, 12, even 15, your dad's friend, you go like, yeah, he had this friend he worked with, and you kind of know something. He had some funny stories, but you didn't, it didn't click with you. And he said just he knew his thing with Reinhardt. I can remember him telling me is if he would readily talk about something, he didn't have a problem. But if someone started trying to correct him or something, he would just be like, I guess you know better than I do. And that was it. So that's probably why you didn't get much from him, is he just got sick of just being corrected and being told, nah, it was Jacob and Ludi, and it was this, and oh, Waltz had a partner, and Dick Holmes was there with Waltz when he died. If someone would have actually been cool, and there were some people that got to know him well enough, and if they would have just let him talk instead of like pushing him, I think we'd know a lot more. But I think he became very distrustful of people. And I know Ralph Papps talked to him, but Ralph Papps' information, I think he just met Reinhardt, and I think most of his information came from Herman, and that became a problem. So, thanks for clearing up things for me. I didn't know, Bob, about that. Yeah, that was a couple of years ago. I just didn't want it to get lost. A bunch of government. No, somebody buy the property. Thanks for the school of guys like y'all. Okay. But, well, I just know because the rumor went around and I called Shoes and I said, hey, did you buy the Wasp? And he said, how the, I, how the hell did you know? He says, you want to tell me how much I paid? And he was laughing because the word got underground and came up, and it was just a deal between him and Clay. And I was like, oh, it's making, they used to call it the old Dutch hunter smoke signal. And Tom Collingbourne was a chief principal guy that ran that, him and Bob Hopper. And they were both gone, but man, it went up, and I heard, and I wanted to find out from him before people were asking me questions or saying anything, and I said anything out of turn or wrong. And he said, no, I was trying to keep it quiet. He says, any property around Goldfield that he can own, he wants because he doesn't want anybody building anything else, and he can always use more room or property. It's real estate. It's not the mine that's important. It's the real estate. There'll be a marker, I'm sure, something there. But like I said, it's a pit. And I mean, it isn't a pit, it's an open pit mine. I got samples from it. I never did any, I just kept the samples. Um, Bob told me to crush them up and see what I could get out of some of them. And there was some near one of the original veins, and I never did anything with it. I just kind of like noted them and put them away. Figured I'd go back and get some more and kind of like just have a collection of that. There's no way to get bulldog, but we were supposed to go to the Black Queen, but I think it's flooded now. You know, I always wanted to get samples from different places. I like having that. I don't want a big collection, but I like having the rocks from different places and like historical. Julia's store, when we were my work took me in that area and back behind the building. One of the bricks was loose, and I realized it was one of the original bricks, and one had fallen, so I took the bricks. And Greg Davis has one, and I have one, and I used it in my backyard. And that was purely because I thought, man, this is a brick from Julia's store, and that's pretty cool stuff. How is Woody and Frank? I don't know how Woody's doing. I'm sure he's doing fine. I haven't talked to Woody. Frank is doing fine. I talked to Frank this week, and he's doing just fine. Still too hot to do anything. He's still at home, but we talked for quite a while. And it was just friends stuff because there's nothing to do. We have a plan, action plan for things we're going to do, and until it cools down and he can make it out to do that stuff, there's just no reason to talk too much about it because it frustrates you because you're talking in circles. And I've learned don't talk in a circle to where you get frustrated and burned out and don't give a crap. Um, got the file, got all the stuff we need, and when the weather's cooling down and we can start acting on some of those things, that stuff pulls out and phone calls are made and things will progress forward. So for the meantime, it's just the friends talking. So, and I hadn't talked to Woody for a couple weeks, um, so it's there's only so many phone calls I can make during the week. I always got research stuff and other stuff, and then I have to work and make a living. So I do that too. So all that stuff happens. Man, the time flew by again. Man, we've been buzzing on this stuff, haven't we? It's been like flying. And it's been good times. So I hope everybody learned something. I didn't see a lot of questions after a while, so I'm hoping it went well because everybody was hearing stuff and taking notes and all. There will be a quiz later. Okay. But no, I'm hoping it was interesting enough. I try to be. I mean, sometimes we get it out someplace, go completely different directions. Love your work. Have you been to Blind Frogs Ranch? Is it far from you? Yes, it's in Utah and Arizona. No, I haven't been there. I don't have an interest in going there. I just didn't want to see anything you can't go here. Thanks, Wayne. No problem. But don't go there. They have a caretaker and someone watches it, and it can be dangerous. Um, no, it's Blind Frog Ranch. I have zero. It's a very small property. I talked once how Oak Island is smaller than actually Garden Valley in the Superstitions, and because of the trees, you can't see all the way across it. But and I think Blind Frog Ranch's area is actually smaller, so it's a much smaller scale than you think it is. What property they legally own and what they mainly film on. Um, Skinwalker Ranch, I had a lot of interest in maybe being able to visit it. I had a couple people through. I thought I could make the connectivity, and I didn't want anything other than to say if you're ever in the area, let us know and come by if we're not filming or something. Because I just wanted to walk through. I just wanted to get a sense of feel of it, and it never happened. So, and I'm kind of like not really that worried about it. But that was just because a lot of that went through my head in the books and a lot of the stuff I'd read about it outside of the spooky voodoo. I wanted, and people I talked to, I wanted to kind of see if my head was in the right place with it and what I thought, which a lot of times the storytelling folklore overshadows the truth. So, All right, so David, time did fly. Yep, David, there you go. David's gone. Well, he's going, and he's going down. Yeah, don't come out here now, David. You guys will die. I have been just enjoying the show. Haven't commented in a while. Well, there you go. Well, it's cool. I don't have a problem with it. I hope it was all good and informative. I wish I could remember what the book was. I didn't get out, and we were talking about it last week. And just before the show started, I thought, okay, I'm going to go grab that book. So when someone brings it up again, we can talk about it. And I was going to grab the book, and then I couldn't remember what book it was. But Jason Fritz's book is here. Pop, pop. And like I said, I talked about a few other things and all. I got to peruse the literary stuff out there. I will not do the fictional stuff. I'm sorry. There's been a couple of the fictional Dutchman books I've read, and I really did not like them. They were so bad. You know, the research. I know they're trying to write something. Being a guy on the historical documented side, and not in the bad taste the word reality makes, but being trying to be in the real world with this stuff, and then people write things that just don't work for me. And it's like, I get it, you know, a historical novel, that wouldn't really work. You got to do a lot of other things. It just, eh. So, I've never been, treasure hunting books are one thing, but The Lost Dutchman I want nonfiction. And there's a lot of fiction in the nonfiction to begin with, but yeah, I can't review fiction books because I read a couple of them and they tried to portray themselves as something else, and then I realized what I was reading, and I finished them, and I really, it left a bad taste in my mouth. Where I told Greg Davis I don't even collect that stuff anymore because I think it's so terrible. It does a disservice to the actual history and historical stuff. So the people that do it, good for them. People that buy it and enjoy it, good for them. I cannot tolerate it because I think that's the very problem we live with of why people think certain things and they don't even realize they were fed that kind of stuff. Joe, I think the old timing got most of the Spains in. Okay, there you go. Well, Trevor said when he was in Spain, I know where the Spanish treasury. He called me that afternoon and said, "Hey, I was down at the treasury today." Yeah, and he says they won't let you video or take pictures in there. But he said, if you want to know where all the gold from the Americas is, I think I can tell you. He says that was an incredible, the most incredible amount of gold and stuff he'd ever seen in his life. He said, yep, the gold they took from the United States, all that stuff, it's in Spain. So that was Trevor's take on it. What's great is that you made yourself accessible where, well, nobody's writing newspapers, nobody reads newspapers. I don't even know the last time I picked up and read a newspaper. A lot of that stuff goes away. You know, there's no magazines anymore. It's online zines. How do you reach people? Forums, and then you can't trust that. I hope here there's discussions, there's back and forth, and then there's things I can look into, and I get to meet and hear what people are thinking and stuff. Maybe help some people out, which is always cool, right? So there we go. We're gonna get out of here. We're gonna get to it because I got a grocery pickup and I'm about to start my vegetarian week. I'm going to go and stay away from the meats for a week um, just to explore that idea. Trevor's very disappointed. I told him, I said, no, we should for 1 week eat and then see how you feel and all that stuff and talk about how much it sucked. But you can say, I did it. I lived that way for a period of time and I hated it. But, and then I told him, watch out because I might want to try to do a vegan week just so you can say, hey, I tried that. So you can be fair and balanced. Because I think to be fair and balanced, you have to be able to say, I understand what you're speaking of. I can't do that. So, but yeah, I think this is the beginning of our vegetarian week, which is going to be a lot of. Frank's going to hate it, but it's beans. There's a lot of beans in this week for protein because I need protein. So there'll be a lot of beans and tortillas this week. Like vegetarian. Yeah, but see, that's what I thought is cool. You know, the vegan one's going to be tough because there'll be no cheese and sour cream. That will be a tough one on me. So that's still in the air, but I think I'll try it just to see how things work. I like my sour cream and my cheese with my beans and my tortillas and stuff. And I'm not a salad person, so there's only so much of that stuff I can do. That being said, and pizza's vegetarian as long as you keep the meats off of it. And I love mushrooms and olives and onions, so I'm good there. All right, so let's get out of here. Enough of my problems and worries for the week. Maybe it'll cause me to lose an extra 3 or 4 pounds, and but I'll probably put that back on with a big steak dinner right afterwards when I get out of it. Thank you, everybody. Catch Chasing Legends on Monday. Trevor, thanks you because things are going so good. Everybody's viewing. We got this day in the Superstition Mountains still rolling out. We got a few more months before we hit the end of the year on that. Thank you, everybody who's purchased and went out and checked out Jason Fritch's book. And I'm going to say it for Glenn Rogers, who doesn't appear to come in here anymore. Once he realized nobody was listening to him, he just bailed because he cared so much about all this stuff. He just didn't stick around. But oh well, that's the way it is, right? Everybody's going to be a millionaire because they wrote a book. Anyways, everybody go out, have a great time. Catch you Chasing Mondays next Friday on live. Until then, I'm going to get out of here, and I need a better. I need an outro. I'm not going to use the intro, so I'm just going to say we're going to develop an outro. Until the next time, adios, amigos. We will